What's up, GV Gang? Brandon here with another video about Switch 2. Today I'm joined by Steve Bowling, and we're going to talk about HD Rumble 2.
2. I'm actually really excited to talk about this because it's one of those things that I think maybe even you and I took for granted when we played the Switch 2 a couple weeks back in New York. But there's a lot to cover here. It is much different than, what we have in the existing Switch today.
Yeah, and I've talked about this before a little bit, but HD Rumble on the Switch 1, I never felt like quite matched the promise of what HD Rumble was supposed to be. I never really had that wow factor. Then again, I didn't shake ice cubes in my Joy-Con because I never bought 1-2 Switch.
I was going to say that 1-2 Switch was the game that really showed it off the best, but not a lot of people played that game.
Yeah, my first and only Switch game at launch was Breath of the Wild. I eventually got Fast RMX and like Super Bomberman R, but I don't recall either of those games really doing anything crazy with HD Rumble, and I don't even think Breath of the Wild did, really.
Yeah, Breath of the Wild didn't really do a whole lot with HD Rumble, which makes sense. It was obviously a Wii U game that became a Switch game later down the line. But even first-party games don't really fully utilize the potential of the current version of HD Rumble.
But that doesn't seem to be the case going into HD Rumble 2. I thought several of the games really benefited from it, especially in mouse mode. I remember playing Super Mario Party Jamboree plus Jamboree TV. We did the mouse mini games, the co-op ones, and it could just be because the Joy-Con 2 has stronger motors, or I don't know what's going on, but every little movement really registered, and I don't know, it's so weird. Like, this mouse doesn't rumble. So having a mouse rumble was a really odd but satisfying experience.
Yeah, I agree with you there. One of the things that stood out to me personally when we were playing Mario Party Jamboree plus Jamboree TV was that we had a mini game where we had to spray paint bombs, and you were either on the blue team or the pink team, and in between those, like, your can would run out and you'd have to shake the Joy-Con, and it really felt like, if you've never shook a can of spray paint, there's a little metal ball inside and it clinks around, and there's definitely a tactile sensation to that in real life, but they also really faithfully replicated that feeling in the friggin' Joy-Con. Like, I remember thinking the combination of hearing the sound of the ball rattling when you're shaking the Joy-Con, and then also just kind of feeling the subtle HD rumble of the thing, I was like, it actually does feel reminiscent. Like, there's a little tiny metal ball in there. And it's those things that it's so weird because in the moment, you're not really thinking about it. Like, it just feels very natural. But then when you walk away from the game and you think about the fact that you were not holding a can of paint, you're like, that's amazing.
John turned me on to 128KB. I wasn't familiar with their channel before, but I've been slowly consuming their Switch 2 content as well. And they said something very similar to what you just said. And that's that you don't think about it. And they said that in regards to a lot of things about Switch 2. But what higher praise can you give a feature than you just don't think about it? Like, it works so well that you're like, yeah, it's supposed to do that.
Yeah, the technology really tends to get out of the way with the Switch 2. The more fancy bells and whistles of the Switch 2 are things that you don't really break into your mind until you shift back to playing something else. Like, going from having played the Switch 2 with you in New York to coming home to my Switch 1, and I was just like, why can't you do more cool stuff?
This rumble isn't rumbly enough. That metal ball in the spray can was my ice cubes in the Joy-Con moment.
Yeah, it's really, really impressive. And it like I said earlier, it's one of those things that's so impressive that you just don't really think. You have that kind of like, when you put a sheet over a bird's cage and they think it's night and they fall asleep. It's like, it's the same way with how realistically replicated some of this stuff is. Like, you don't think about the fact that you're not actually doing that until you really pause and you're like, that was a video game and that was a plastic controller and it felt like I was shaking a spray paint can. That's wild. Like, that is absolutely nuts that the vibration is so precise. I'm really curious to see, because in the years since the Switch 1 came out, we've obviously learned that the company that did HD Rumble in the Switch then went on to make the haptics for the PS5 DualSense. And now, 5 years after that, we're getting HD Rumble 2, which could potentially, it's too early for me to tell, but could potentially be an even more advanced version of the haptics that are in the DualSense.
Yeah, I don't know like where I would rate HD Rumble 2 in comparison to the DualSense, because like something like Astro's Playroom was such a showpiece for that. And obviously we didn't get enough time with the Switch 2 to really make a declaration like that. But, if my experience is even remotely in the same area as what we're going to see when the Switch 2 comes out, I think there's a good chance that it will at least rival it. One of the other mini games we played in Super Mario Party Jamboree, it was the toy car, like jousting mini game. And
yes,
I remember that was one of the first ones we played, and I remember immediately being like, whoa, I can feel the tension in the car turning, like as I'm pulling it back. Because in that minigame, it's like those toy cars you had when you were a kid. You would put them on a flat surface, you'd pull back, they would kind of rev up, you'd let go, and then they would speed off. It's exactly that. It felt exactly like that. And the rumble was so cool in that moment, because not only did it, give you the sensation of the tension building up in the car, like because of the rumble, you knew when it was done. Like when you pull it back and, with the actual car, you feel that little click. Same thing applied there.
I remember playing that and thinking that I felt the grip of the wheels on the surface. So you're pulling it back and you feel kind of like that slight bit of like the wheels hesitating as you pull them in the wrong direction intentionally, of course. But then it suddenly stops and you're like, oh, I'm at max power now. And you let it go and you watch the car zoom off, and it feels so much like actually doing that with a real toy. And it really helps that those toy cars are about the size, or you maintain the same grip as you would on the mouse con, right? So it just felt remarkable to me to have this kind of, moment where I again, you kind of get pulled out of reality a bit. Like you're holding objectively not a toy car, but the feeling in your hand tells you I'm holding a toy car with little rubber feet, with little rubber wheels. And it's a feeling that if you ever played with one of those as a kid, you know exactly what I'm talking about right now. And it feels as close as you can without having an actual toy car in your hand to the real deal. It was, it's just kind of baffling to me how pinpoint accurate these are, because, we saw an example or two examples of this on the Switch 1. Here at the Switch 2, we saw loads of these at various games throughout the event.
One of probably the most impressive example overall was Dragon Drive, just because of the nature of the controls of that game. It's very similar to like pulling the car back in the Mario Party mini game, but like you're spinning the wheelchair wheels, and you can feel like each increment of movement in each of the Joy-Cons when you're doing that, and it's so intuitive. It makes controlling the wheelchair easier. And you don't ever think about HD Rumble or Rumble in general, like making controlling something easier.
You're right. It's something that I was a little confused by, because obviously, I've never had cause to use a wheelchair. So I don't have the real world experience with this one to align with what I was feeling in the game, but it does come across as what I would imagine, specifically the wheelchair design from this game, because it's not like your standard wheelchair in that the tires are more like BMX tires. Like they have, texture to them, where, if maybe I'm wrong, but like a traditional wheelchair, like a standard wheelchair, usually has like untextured tires, I believe. But you could feel like almost, I remember likening it to if I put my hand on a bike tire as it was spinning to try to slow it down. It felt to me like that's what it would be like, because I've done that. I mean, I was an idiot kid. Like, I'd be like, this tire looks like it needs to stop, and grab it. And it felt like you could feel the texture of the wheel in your hand as you were pushing with the Joy-Con. And it did give you a sense of grounding to the world within the game. Like you're like, oh, I could turn by just moving, this, or I could stop this wheel and turn this one. And you picked it up way, way, way quicker than I did.
Yeah, I don't know how much I can attribute this to HD Rumble 2, but like as I was playing, I just intuitively like understood how to quick turn. I was like, I turn one wheel forward and the other wheel backward, and I'll turn real fast if I do that. And it just felt natural, and HD Rumble is certainly helpful in helping me come to that conclusion. It's so hard to adequately describe. Like, if you haven't gotten to feel it, it like I said before, it really fulfills the promise that I thought HD Rumble was originally going to fulfill.
Yeah, I feel like this is a situation where I think when I first saw HD Rumble for the original Switch and I saw Koizumi, in the direct, like, look at the ice cubes and doing this whole thing, I was like, wow, I can't wait for how realistic this is going to be. And the expectation and the reality did not really align for the original Switch. Like most games, I think if you've played third-party games on Switch, then you're probably familiar with the extremely loud buzzing sound that emits from the controller in most games. Like you'll just hear like to the point that it's off-putting. It makes me feel like my controller is about to die. A lot of developers they just treated it like normal Rumble. The way that it was done on the N64. And I don't think we really got to that point where we had realistic haptics. And I have to credit Sony here to a degree, because I feel like Sony pushed the haptics in the DualSense much more than Nintendo did with HD Rumble. So I think that, thanks to Sony kind of bearing the HD Rumble torch to a degree, we now have a developer community that is more invested in better haptics. And so, I mean, because we didn't just see good haptics. I think the most significant examples were certainly Nintendo's games, but, I played Cyberpunk. I felt good. I wouldn't say like, I didn't feel like the pitter patter of footsteps, but while I was running around briefly shooting people in Night City, I certainly felt more nuanced Rumble that I'm used to experiencing in third-party games.
Yeah, I'm curious how far that other developers will take it. Nintendo even took the first HD Rumble into some weird places, like Kirby Star Allies, where when you 100% the game, it plays a song for you through the controller. And I remember that just completely blowing me away, because I did not expect it to happen. And I've already had that experience a couple times with HD Rumble 2 at the Switch 2 event, just because the technology is way more advanced. It's a lot more precise and more pronounced. So I wonder, like, what is the peak? Where do they stop? What's the ceiling on this technology?
Yeah, I think that you can do a lot to aid in immersion with this. But I do also appreciate the more subtle approaches that folks have taken, like Metroid Prime 4, for instance. It has what I would call a more traditional implementation of Rumble. Not everybody's trying to do something crazy, new, and innovative with it, but it felt good. Like every shot of Samus's arm cannon, and I don't know if this is. I imagine it has to be true, but I only felt Rumble in the right Joy-Con for that. So when I was shooting, I would only feel the right one vibrate versus, it's not like vibrating my left hand for no reason.
Yeah.
And that felt really cool. When I would charge up a shot, I would feel the Joy-Con kind of subtly grow in vibration as I was doing that. And each different type of shot, like if you fired a missile, it felt different than firing just a regular blast. Not super groundbreaking stuff, but it was nice to know that it's not just like bzz, 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 you know, when you're shooting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's I have a Nitro deck for my Switch for playing in handheld mode, and probably my biggest criticism of it is the rumble. The rumble is like obnoxiously strong. It's even across the entire device. There's no nuance to any of it. And it's when I play with that I start to recognize, oh, HD Rumble was good. Like, it was doing what it said it was doing. Just, it's doing it so much better on Switch 2 that it's not even comparable anymore.
Yeah. You know, it's one of those features that's hard to talk about because, like we said earlier, when it's working at its peak, you're not thinking about it. You're not cognizant of how well it works. You know, going back to Nintendo first party games, you know, even Donkey Kong Bonanza made some great use of Rumble, because you could feel as like you punched through the earth, you would just feel kind of like a sensation of like breaking through stuff when you're playing Donkey Kong. And it's weird how it's a hard feeling to communicate, but like you could feel like the way, if you, gosh, I don't want to encourage violence, but like if you punched a wall, right? Like you would, the reverberation that you would feel in your arm from that, you feel something reminiscent of that. Please don't punch your wall. Don't do it.
No, that would be a bad idea. There was also that mini game in Switch 2 Welcome Tour, which wasn't really a showcase for HD Rumble 2 so much as it was just can you tell what Rumble's the strongest? But I do wonder like how possible that would be on older Rumble technology versus what we have now.
Right. I think people forget that Rumble technology has come a very, very long way. From the days of, you know, having a Rumble pack in your N64 controller that required its own separate batteries and did like it did Rumble or Rumble more, you know, versus versus what we have today, where you have very subtle nuances in how this works, and the fact that the controllers are designed around it. The one thing I will say that I was a bit surprised by was I had much more trouble detecting the subtleties of HD Rumble 2 in the Pro Controller 2. And I would say that's been true. Like I would say HD Rumble has always felt best in Joy-Con. Maybe it's because of their size versus the motor or what have you. But even on the Switch 1, I feel like the Pro Controller is maybe not as accurate or doesn't feel the same is probably the best way to put it.
I played most Switch 1 games with a Pro Controller, and that might be contributing to how I feel about the original version of HD Rumble, because I agree with you. I think the HD Rumble and the Pro Controller is significantly worse than it is on the Joy-Cons, and it has to be related to the size of the controller. I don't understand why else it would be such a downgrade. But yeah, I'm just like, I'm searching my memory banks, and I don't remember necessarily having an aha moment with the Pro Controller 2. So I fear we might be suffering the same fate.
Well, it's very difficult to say because in specific demos, we weren't allowed to play every demo with whatever controller we wanted. Right. Whatever controller was there was the one we got to play. In some games, you know, some of the games that were most remarkable, Mario Party and Dragon Drive, from an HD Rumble 2 perspective, were only available on Joy-Con. So we played those, you know, the way that Nintendo wanted us to play them. And of course, some of those games, I don't think you could play Dragon Drive with the Pro Controller because the main input method requires the mouse sensors. And the same is true of the mini games we played in Jamboree TV. You had to use the mouse pointer to spray paint the bombs. So it's difficult to say now. I think I could be wrong, that Sony placed rumble motors in each grip of the DualSense. I'm not sure if the Switch 1 Pro controller is that way, and obviously we have no idea where rumble motors are placed in the Switch 2 Pro controller. Somebody will have to be braver than me and take one apart at some point to figure that out. But I think that Nintendo was very focused on the Joy-Con this time around. I think they're very proud, and rightfully so, of the Joy-Con. It feels like when the Switch 1 came out, Nintendo wanted to really show that the Pro Controller was like, hey, if you're serious, this is what you play on, whereas this time with the Joy-Con, they're really trying to show off like these are technologically the most advanced controllers we've ever made, but there's a Pro Controller if you prefer it. And it feels like more of a secondary thought this time. So I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if you're right about HD Rumble 2 being a little bit lesser of an experience, but I wouldn't rule it out just yet. I want to be able to test it side by side, like play Mario Kart World on Joy-Con and then play the exact same experience on a Pro Controller and see what the difference in sensation is there. Because if anything, Sony has proven with the DualSense that you can do really great high fidelity rumble in a controller form factor.
I would even be interested in playing something like Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom on a Switch 1 Pro Controller and then compare that to the new versions on Switch 2, just to see if there's any difference. There might not be any difference from a software side, so it'd be hard to say, but if I do feel a difference, that would be kind of exciting.
Yeah, it would be very exciting, and it is worth noting. It's, I'm talking about how this feels like a lesser experience and all this, but everything across the board felt better than Switch 1. The HD Rumble 2 feels like a generational leap in terms of how Rumble feels in video games compared to the Switch 1. I think it's a worthy rival to the current gold standard, which is the DualSense. But that's one of those things that you really, really, you're gonna have to challenge yourself on that one. And some people might notice it and some might not. But I would be excited to see if Switch 1 games, particularly Switch 2 edition games, get HD Rumble 2 enhancements, because that's one thing that Nintendo's just not talking about. And I get that it's probably not the sexiest marketing point, but I have to imagine that some of these Switch 2 editions will have some HD Rumble 2 features.
And to be clear, we've already experienced one that does in Super Mario Party Jamboree. So there's a precedent that it could be improved in some of those other games. It's just Mario Party is more of a showpiece for something like that than, say, Zelda.
Yeah, I think with Zelda notes and the Korok GPS, you could probably do something. You could maybe have your controller start to vibrate more, in a different cadence or a different beat depending on your closeness to it. Or you could even one thing that I love is, Brandon, you and I, we didn't just do the Switch 2 event in New York. We got to hang out a little bit, go walk around town, see things. And one of my favorite features on, one of my favorite devices is that my Apple Watch, which I'm not wearing right now, will tap your wrist. It'll simulate tapping your wrist to let you know, turn left, turn right, without having to look at it all the time. And I could see, Nintendo potentially using HD Rumble 2 to do something similar. Like, hey, if Link needs to turn left to find the Korok, your controller will vibrate twice, or it'll vibrate 3 times if you need to turn right or whatever. I would love to see them implement some of this stuff, because HD Rumble 2 just, it feels a lot better. And that's crazy, because I didn't think HD Rumble 1, when implemented correctly, felt bad at all.
Yeah, this is a feature I want to be excited about. And based on what I've experienced with HD Rumble 2 so far, I am. I just want to be able to maintain that enthusiasm, for a little bit longer than I did with the original version.
Right. The Switch 2 has the potential for this. I think that, like I alluded to earlier, with Sony kind of also following along this same thing, it's becoming more of a core console feature as opposed to just a Nintendo specific thing, which I think will give developers incentive to work more with it. Because if the technologies between 2 competing platforms are similar, there's that much more chance of developers fully utilizing the feature set. Where, it's hard to say where things fell off with Switch 1. Was it Nintendo not providing appropriate tools, or not, teaching developers how to better use HD Rumble? Or was this just developers not caring because it was too much effort to make HD Rumble work properly? But I think we, at least now, as kind of a gaming community, we have enough, the more players in the world have access to this feature set than not at this point. So I'm hoping developers will be a little more proactive about actually utilizing these, because when you get a game that uses Rumble, whether it's HD Rumble 2 or HD Rumble 1 or whatever Sony's branding the DualSense, haptics, it adds to the immersion so much.
Yeah, it won't be long before we find out. As of recording this, we are 6 weeks and a day away from the Switch 2 launch. which is
that's crazy.
crazy. And then pre-orders for US go live tomorrow night, so it's kind of a crazy time here to be a Nintendo fan.
That's a whole other video.
Yeah. So let us know in the comments below what you think about, what did you think about HD Rumble on the original Switch? Is it something that you're interested in seeing the improvements on with Switch 2? I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. But before we go, make sure you check out our Patreon if you want to get some videos early, take part in our Discord community, or get some of our podcasts early. There's lots of little benefits you can get. You can check the link in the description below for that. But until next time, keep the games good and the vibes greater. Bye now.
Bye.